2001: A Space Odyssey, Star Wars, Alien, Blade Runner, and The Matrix. What do all these films have in common, you ask? Well, they are all films in the science fiction genre. In the 1950s, the mass audience started to have a massive appetite for science fiction films. This is regarded by many historians of the genre to be the golden age of sci-fi. Join me as I go on a journey in discovering the history of science fiction in the film industry.
Even though science fiction had been around since the late 1800s, with classic science fiction novels like The Time Machine and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, it wasn't really until the early 1900s when science fiction started to break to the film industry. This all started in 1902 with the release of the French film A Trip to the Moon. Films that featured aliens saw a huge increase in popularity during the 1950s. Many of these featured political commentaries while also mixing it up with the concept of UFOs. An example of this is the 1951 film The Day the Earth Stood Still, which was later remade in 2008. Another example of this is The Thing from Another World, which came out the same year, and was later remade by John Carpenter in 1982 and was remade again in 2011. The idea of alien invasion also featured in the film Invasion of the Body Snatchers. After the rush of science fiction films in the 1950s, there were relatively few in the 1960s. One of the most significant films of the 1960s was 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick, and is regarded as the seminal entry in the science fiction genre, as it influenced several later entries. This movie was groundbreaking in the quality of its visual effects, in its realistic portrayal of space travel, and in the epic and transcendent scope of its story. The 1970s saw an enormous resurgence in interest of the science fiction films, but this time, instead of being more involved in low-budget B-movies of the 50s, it started to delve more into the big-budget blockbuster films that we know as today. Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, both released in 1977, contained a mystical element reminiscent of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Following the huge success of Star Wars, science fiction became bankable, and each major studio rushed into production through their available projects. As a direct result, Star Trek was reborn as a film franchise that continued. Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extraterrestrial became one of the most successful films of the 1980s. In the 1990s, disaster movies remained popular. Both Armageddon and Deep Impact used the threat of a massive impact with the Earth. In the 2010s, in terms of science fiction films in cinema, certain directors of the genre seem to focus more on delving into more of a diverse range of different genres, other than space travel and fantasy films. They seem to delve more into superhero films, action adventure, horror, and more independent art house films that have gone on to receive critical acclaim and awards recognition.
What are your overall thoughts on science fiction as a whole?
I believe it's one of the more creative genres.
Sometimes it does seem quite realistic.
Science fiction is probably one of my favourite genres. It's really just, it's interesting to look at all of these different ideas that people can come up with.
What science fiction films do you enjoy in particular?
The Marvel universe,
Yes.
The Matrix, some of the darker ones as well, like Minority Report.
Star Trek.
Yeah, one of my favourite science fiction films is a film called Lucy, and it's sort of a cross between a science fiction film but also like a superhero film.
Any particular reason why Star Trek? Or?
Well, my mother enjoyed it when she was a kid, so I guess that she sort of kind of forced me into watching it.
Are there any science fiction directors in particular that you enjoy, or does it doesn't matter what it is as long as you enjoy the film?
It's leaning more towards doesn't matter as long as I enjoy a film, because I rather enjoy franchises and characters more than individual directors.
I'm not the sort of person that's bothered by like the directors. It's more about the name of the film, or it's about like, I don't care about who's in it, I don't care about who made it, I care about the actual content itself.
Just as long as it looks good.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really know the names of many directors. If you were to tell me that yeah, it's all about the action and the technology in film.
Do you think there will be any science fiction now that we might look back on like 10, 15 years time now? It might look back as a classic, or?
I'd have to say early Marvel films, things like Iron Man 1, where there was such a jump in CGI quality. Before that, you had the Rubberman Superman, which was 2 years before 2006 Superman Returns.
Yeah.
Only 2 years later, you have the first Iron Man, which was beautiful quality CGI. And things then like Ant-Man, Star Wars 8, Star Wars 7 would be a very good one with the lightsaber style effects, Kylo Ren holding a blaster shot in midair. There's a lot of iconic shots that we would look back on, but I don't agree that we would look back on films in particular, more certain shots.